I still remember that day so clearly. It felt like the world was closing in on me, and I had nowhere to turn. The courtroom was full of people, their eyes all on me. I was just a teenager, barely 16, and yet here I was, standing in front of a judge, fighting for my life. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest as I stood there, trying to keep my hands from shaking. The judge, a middle-aged man with sharp glasses and a stern face, didn't make it easy. He seemed so sure of himself, like he had everything figured out. He looked at me with this cold, judgmental stare, and I could feel his eyes cutting through me. "Is this your defense?" he asked, his voice dripping with sarcasm. A teenage girl trying to play the victim in a situation she can't even understand? I could feel the anger rising in me, but I held it back. I knew I had to stay calm. I couldn't let him see me break. I wasn't the one who started it. They didn't know what it was like to be me. To be pushed around and silenced, to have people tell you what you could and couldn't do, but no one cared about that. To them, I was just another kid who didn't know how to keep my mouth shut. The judge's smirk made my stomach twist. "You think you can stand here and explain away what happened?" he said, his voice growing louder. "You're just a kid. What could you possibly know about defending yourself?" I wanted to scream, to shout at him that I wasn't just some kid. I wasn't weak. I had been through things that he couldn't even imagine, but I kept my mouth shut. It wasn't about what I wanted to say, it was about proving that I could stand my ground. That was the moment I knew I had to outsmart him. I had no choice. If I didn't, everything I'd worked for, everything I'd fought for, would be lost. I took a deep breath, looked the judge straight in the eyes and said, "I may be young, but I know exactly what it means to fight for myself." The judge raised an eyebrow at my words, clearly surprised that I wasn't backing down. There was a moment of silence in the courtroom, like everyone was waiting for me to crack. I could feel their eyes on me, but this time, I wasn't afraid. I had no choice but to speak my truth. "You think you're so clever, don't you?" the judge sneered. "A girl who thinks she can outsmart me. Let's see what kind of defense you have." I felt the sting of his words, but it wasn't enough to make me hesitate. I was used to being underestimated. People saw me as weak, just another teenager with no experience or knowledge. But what they didn't realize was that I had learned to fight in ways they couldn't even understand. I stood a little straighter, my voice steady. "I'm not trying to outsmart anyone. I'm just telling the truth. The whole truth." The prosecutor, a woman in her early 40s with a sharp suit and a sharper smile, chuckled under her breath. "Truth? Your version of the truth is a fairy tale," she said, looking me up and down like I was some kind of joke. I wanted to lash out. I wanted to tell her that they had no idea what I'd been through, what I had to fight against every single day. But I held back, knowing that I had to stay focused. If I let my emotions get the best of me, I'd lose everything. Instead, I began to explain my side of the story, how it wasn't just a random fight, how I had been pushed to the edge and forced to defend myself. I could see the judge's expression change ever so slightly as I spoke, though he quickly masked it with his usual stern look. "You're claiming you were defending yourself?" he said, his voice mocking. "And yet, I don't see any signs of self-defense. No bruises, no injuries, just a teenager with a story." I could feel the weight of his disbelief pressing down on me. The entire courtroom was watching me, and I could sense their judgment, but I refused to back down. "I didn't attack anyone," I said, my voice unwavering. "I was protecting myself from someone who thought they could push me around, and when I fought back, they made it seem like I was the villain." The prosecutor scoffed, but the judge remained silent, his gaze fixed on me. I could tell he was thinking, trying to figure out if there was more to this than what he had initially assumed. For the first time, I saw a flicker of doubt in his eyes. It wasn't much, but it was enough to keep me going. I could feel the tension building in the courtroom, like everything was hanging by a thread. My words hung in the air, and for a moment, even the judge seemed to pause, like he wasn't so sure about his earlier assumptions. I saw a glimmer of something in his eyes, something that made me hope that maybe, just maybe, he was starting to listen. But then the prosecutor interrupted. "This is absurd," she said, her voice dripping with contempt. "A teenage girl defending herself? Who's going to believe that?" She turned to the judge, her tone a mix of pleading and mocking. "Your Honor, she's just trying to play the victim. We have evidence that contradicts her story. She's clearly hiding the truth." I could feel the anger rising in my chest, but I didn't let it show. I had to stay calm. They couldn't see me break. I knew they were trying to make me look bad. They were trying to paint me as the troublemaker. But I wasn't going to let them get away with it. I had one card left to play. One thing they hadn't counted on. With a deep breath, I stood up, my hands trembling slightly as I reached into my bag. "I have something you might want to see," I said, looking directly at the judge. He raised an eyebrow. "What is this?" I pulled out my phone and showed him the video. It was clear, undeniable proof of what really happened. The video showed everything, from the moment the other person started threatening me, to the part where I had no choice but to defend myself. It wasn't pretty, but it was real. And it was undeniable. For a moment, the room went silent. The judge stared at the screen, and I saw his expression shift again. He wasn't mocking me anymore. He wasn't even looking at me like I was some naive teenager. He was looking at me like I was telling the truth. "Where did you get this?" he asked, his voice softer now. I swallowed hard, trying to keep my emotions in check. "It's from my phone. I didn't know what would happen, but I knew I had to record it. I couldn't let them make me the bad guy without the truth coming out." The prosecutor was speechless, her mouth hanging open in disbelief. For the first time, she didn't have anything to say. The judge leaned back in his chair, staring at the video, his face unreadable. And for the first time, I felt like I was finally being heard. The silence in the courtroom was deafening. No one spoke. The judge kept staring at the video, his eyes flicking from the screen to me, as if trying to make sense of what he was seeing. I could feel my heart beating so loudly, it almost drowned out everything else. I was holding my breath, waiting for him to speak, hoping he would see the truth in what I had shown him. Finally, the judge exhaled slowly, pushing his glass up his nose. "I wasn't expecting this," he said, his voice calmer now. He looked over at the prosecutor, who was still frozen in shock. "You might want to reconsider your position on this case." I could feel a small spark of hope. This wasn't over yet, but the tide was turning. I wasn't the one on trial anymore. I wasn't the one being mocked and belittled. The prosecutor straightened up, but she didn't look so confident now. "This is just one video," she said weakly. "It doesn't prove everything. It doesn't tell the whole story." The judge glanced at her, then back at the video. "It tells enough for now." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. It was like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. Finally, someone was listening. Finally, someone cared. "You're dismissed for now," the judge said, looking at me for the first time with something like respect in his eyes. "We'll review the evidence, and I'll make a decision soon. But I need to make one thing clear. Your defense is valid. You did what you had to do." My heart swelled. I hadn't been wrong. I hadn't been lying. I had stood up for myself, and it was starting to pay off. As I turned to leave the courtroom, I could feel the eyes of everyone on me. But this time, it didn't feel like judgment. It felt like recognition. Like they finally saw me for who I really was. A person, not just a kid to be pushed around. I walked out of that courtroom with my head held high. I had no idea what would happen next, but for the first time in my life, I felt like I had control. Like I wasn't just a victim of my circumstances anymore. I had outsmarted them all, and I wasn't going to let anyone take that away from me. Days passed after that courtroom moment, and I couldn't shake the feeling of anticipation. Every time my phone buzzed or I got a letter, my heart skipped a beat. I had given my best shot, but would it be enough? Could a single video really change everything? I couldn't help but wonder if they would find a way to dismiss it, to twist it into something it wasn't. Then, I got the call. "Miss, the judge has made his decision," the voice on the other end said. "Please come to court tomorrow." My stomach did a flip, and I could barely speak. Tomorrow would be the moment that decided everything. It could all go one of two ways. I had no idea what to expect, but the nerves were overwhelming. The next morning, I stepped back into that courtroom, my hands clammy and my heart racing. The prosecutor was sitting at her desk, her usual smugness replaced by a quiet frustration. The judge was sitting at the front, his expression unreadable. The entire room fell silent, when the judge finally spoke. After reviewing all the evidence, including the video presented by Miss Your Name, I've come to a conclusion. I find that the defendant was acting in self-defense, and I am dismissing all charges. A wave of shock swept through the courtroom. I could see the prosecutor's face drop, and for the first time, she didn't know what to say. Her carefully constructed arguments had fallen apart, and there was nothing left for her to do. I stood there, frozen for a moment. My heart seemed to stop before it started racing again. I had won. I had actually won. The judge looked directly at me, his voice softer now. You were right to stand up for yourself. I'm sorry if I doubted you at first. You're not just a victim. You showed strength, and that's something I can respect. Tears filled my eyes, but I didn't let them fall. It wasn't just relief. It was a sense of validation, a feeling that I wasn't worthless, that I wasn't invisible. As I walked out of the courtroom, my legs felt like they were made of jelly, but the weight on my shoulders had suddenly lifted. The moment I stepped into the sunlight, everything around me felt different. It was like I was seeing the world with new eyes. The sky seemed bluer, the air fresher. For the first time in so long, it felt like I could breathe without that constant feeling of being trapped. The city's noises, once overwhelming, now felt like they belonged to a world that was far away. My mind kept replaying the judge's words, the way he finally acknowledged the truth. I had done it. I had fought for myself, and I had won. It wasn't just about that single moment in the courtroom, it was everything that had led me to that moment. Every single time I had been told I wasn't enough, every time someone made me feel small, every time I was dismissed as just another teenager who didn't understand the world, who didn't know how to handle the weight of life. All of those moments, those voices, telling me I wasn't worth the fight, that I wasn't worth being heard, they were all wrong. And in that moment, I had proven it. I wasn't just a passive bystander in my own life anymore. I had taken control. I had fought for my truth, and now, I had it. I could feel the pride swelling in my chest. As I walked down the steps of the courthouse, I could feel the eyes of the world on me. But this time, it didn't matter. I wasn't the same girl who had walked in. I wasn't just a teenage girl anymore. I was a person who had learned how to stand up for myself, no matter how many times the world told me I shouldn't. No matter how many people thought I was too young or too naive to know what I was talking about. I knew better now. I knew my worth, and nothing could take that from me. That was a lesson I would carry with me forever, long after this case, long after today. I had learned that my voice mattered, that I had the right to defend myself. I had learned that sometimes you have to fight for yourself when no one else will, and when you do, you might just surprise everyone, including yourself. That feeling, the one that told me I was strong, that I was capable, was something I would never forget. I hope you enjoyed the story and the incredible twist that came with it. If you found it inspiring or thought-provoking, don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss out on more thrilling stories like this. Like if you're all about standing up for what's right, comment your thoughts below. I'd love to hear how you felt about the ending. And if you think someone else needs to hear this, don't hesitate to share it with them. Thanks for watching, and I can't wait to share more with you soon.